Good evening. So it seems as though something has led you to the campsite of the Orator. Well, as you can see, I've stoked the fire, which means it's time for you to pull up your chair and settle in, because tonight, I have another tale to tell. When two parents decide to take their kids to the Great Wolf Lodge, they expect that they're going to have an awesome vacation. The kids get to play around the water park, and the parents can sit poolside and relax, have a drink, and sort of enjoy themselves. And throughout the day, that's exactly what happens. It is not until late at night, when they retire to their rooms and try to go to sleep, that they realize their room has been infested by an evil entity. But before we begin, if you find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and I do these longer videos Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Second, of course, all of my videos are first-hand true accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. Today's story comes from Redditor NickCav707, and I will make sure to link his original story below. But if you or anybody you know has a story and you think that it would fit well on my channel, just reach out to me on any of my social media, and we will find time to get together, collect your story, and potentially one day feature it here on The Orator. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's tale. It is a story that I call The Entity at Great Wolf Lodge. So Nick and Amanda are married, and they have two little kids. They have a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son, and they decide they're going to take their family on a vacation to this place called the Great Wolf Lodge. Now, if you've never been to the Great Wolf Lodge, it's a giant indoor resort slash water park. It's an entire hotel, and it's kind of outdoor themed. There's bears and foxes and people in animal costumes walking around. They have story time and things like that. There's all of these different activities, but the main attraction at the Great Wolf Lodge is the giant water park. It's an indoor water park, has slides, lazy rivers, this giant bucket that pours water down on you. It is a kid's dream. And so for Nick and Amanda, they just want to take their kids there, have a really great time, sort of relax poolside and enjoy themselves. And so they decide to book and go on this vacation. And so Nick and Amanda, they take their kids to the Great Wolf Lodge in Manteca, California, and they show up, they check in, they get to their room, and their room is this really cool suite. And so how this suite is sort of designed is it's actually got two different entrances. There's the adult entrance where you enter into this bedroom, and it's sort of like for adults. There's just, the big master bedroom, or sometimes there are two queens, and then there's the TV, there's a couch, there's a table to eat at. A lot of times there's even like a microwave, refrigerator, all of those different things. But then there's actually a door that you can walk through from this room into a separate room. And this is the kids' side of the suite. And it's got bunk beds, and it's got more like kid-themed stuff. It's got all of these different carvings and things on the wood and around the whole room to make it seem more fun for kids. And so there's a separate entrance into the kids' room from the hallway. So you can enter each of these rooms individually, but then you can go between them also. And so they get in, and they settle all their stuff. Of course, Nick and Amanda, their kids, they go into the kids' side of the room and set up on the bunk beds. Their daughter's on the top bunk. Their son is on the bottom bunk. And then, Nick and Amanda, they get all of their stuff set up on their side. And then they go and they have fun at the water park. They hang out throughout the day. The kids get exhausted. They have a ton of fun. And then at some point, they finally return to their room for the night. And everybody kind of gets set up. They settled in. And at some point, they all fall asleep. And it seems like everything's going to go fine. The night is going to go smooth when in the middle of the night, somewhere around 3 a.m., Nick is woken out of his sleep by his son. His 6-year-old son, is right by their bedside, and he's screaming and crying and trying to wake Nick and Amanda up. And of course, it takes Nick a minute. It's the middle of the night, but he does rub the sleep from his eyes, and he turns over and he's like, buddy, what's wrong? What's going on? Why are you sad? Now, Nick wants to take a second and tell everybody that his kids, both his daughter and his son, they have been in their own bedroom at their house like since they were babies, and they've never had nightmares. They've never felt the need to come and sleep in their parents' room all the time. They've been very independent for a really long time. So for Nick, it's a little bit weird that his son is there freaking out, but also, you know, they're at the Great Wolf Lodge, so they're not at their house. It's an unfamiliar place, so maybe that's what's going on. And so, you know, Nick, he tries to ascertain exactly what his son is saying as he's crying and freaking out, but eventually his son calms down enough to explain to Nick and Amanda that he was in his bed when all of a sudden there was this scary shadow person that was approaching his bed, and he jumped up out of bed, ran around this person, and then came into Nick and Amanda's side of the room. Now, Nick and Amanda, they left the door open between their kids' side and their side just to make sure that there was free passage and everything like that. And so, you know, his son, he runs into the room, and that's when he woke them up, and he says, "There's this person. He's still in there now. You gotta go make sure everything's okay." And so Nick, you know, he kind of just thinks, all right, like I said, maybe we're in an unfamiliar place. He's freaking out. I checked before they went to bed. Everything was completely locked. In fact, the Great Wolf Lodge, how their doors lock is they have a bolt lock, but then they also have that little device that clicks over. So even if you were to somehow bypass all of the locks, you wouldn't be able to open the door. It opened for a second, but then it's almost like a chain lock would stop it from happening, but it's two thick metal bars. And so he remembers, I clicked that over, everything was locked. It's impossible for someone to be in that room. And so he thinks his son maybe just had a night terror, so he brings him into his bed, lays him down, and eventually everybody falls asleep. Fast forward maybe an hour later, finally, Nick has fallen asleep, Amanda's fallen asleep, their son's fallen asleep, and then suddenly Amanda wakes up, and she starts shaking Nick, and she's like, "Nick, wake up, something's wrong." And Nick, he shoots up, he's like, what's going on? And Amanda, she's like, our daughter, she was just screaming, "Mom, something's wrong." And she's like, "You seriously didn't hear it?" She's screaming over there. And so Nick, he jumps up and he runs into the other room. And as he's running into the other room, he hears his daughter, but she's not screaming. She's hyperventilating. He can hear her crying loud. Her breathing is loud. And he runs into this other room. And his daughter, you know, he looks at the top bunk where she's supposed to be, and she's not there. And he looks over in the corner where he's hearing the sighing and hyperventilating coming from. And there she is, off the bunk, in the corner, huddled in a bunch of these blankets, crying and hyperventilating, freaking out. And so right away, Nick runs up, scoops her up, and runs her back into his room, into his side. And he sets her down on the bed. And before even asking any questions, he runs back into this room. Because now his son is freaked out, and now his daughter is also freaking out. So he's thinking, it's impossible for anyone or anything to be in that room, but now they've both had weird experiences. I need to check this out. And so he goes over, he flips on all of the lights, and he does a completely thorough search of their side of the room. He checks everywhere. He's checking the doors to make sure that it's completely locked, and it still is. He goes into the bathroom and makes sure that there's nothing there that somebody could maybe hide underneath or behind. He does the same thing. He looks under and around all of the beds, all of the desks. Heck, he even checks behind mirrors and things like that just to make sure there's not like some kind of secret passageway that somebody is, you know, sneaking in. There's not anything really nefarious going on. And at the end of his very, very thorough search, there's just nothing. And so, you know, he thinks this is very odd that both my son and daughter, who've never had issues, never had night terrors, never had nightmares, never freaked out, both of them have now freaked out. But he returns back to his room, and he sits down on the bed, and now everybody, of course, is awake. And so Nick and Amanda start to question their daughter. Hey, what happened? And she starts to explain. She was in her bunk bed, and there was this entity, and it entered the room, and it started walking toward her bunk bed. And she's watching this thing kind of huddled with just her face poking out. And she said it was this tall enough to be standing above her bunk bed looking down at it. Thin, white, and she said its skin was almost like smooth paper. It didn't have any wrinkles or creases. It was really smooth, and it was white as paper. And she said the head looked kind of elongated, more so than a normal human's would look. And this thing, it started approaching her, walking right up to her bed. And that's when she was like hyperventilating, and she's like, I did not want to scream. I was terrified that this thing was going to kill me. She's like, it felt evil, scary, and then it turned around and it started walking back out their door into Nick and Amanda's side of the suite. And that is when their daughter climbed down and went and got into the corner and started hyperventilating. And so, they're asking her questions, what did it look like? And she's explaining it, and, where did it come from? And she said she just, she woke up and it was walking towards her in the room, and they're trying to get these details. And then Amanda says, baby, why were you screaming Mom then? If you were trying to be quiet, why were you screaming? I heard you. And their daughter says, Mom, I was not screaming at all. And Nick says, yeah, when I went in there, she was just hyperventilating and crying, but she was trying to be as quiet as she could. And their daughter said, Mom, I did not say a word. I was so scared this thing was going to kill me. I didn't try to make any noise. She said, in fact, I was trying to be as quiet as I could, and then I couldn't help it. I was trying not to cry. I knew if I cried and made too much noise, it would come back for me, and I just couldn't do it. And that's why I was crying. And she's crying again and trying to explain everything. And eventually, they calm her down, and they lay her down in their bed. And Nick just says, you know what? Something weird is going on over there. Let's just leave it alone. And so he goes over there, he makes sure all the lights in that room are turned on, and then he just closes and locks that door in between the two suites and thinks, whatever the heck is going on over there, it's over there, let's leave it alone. And then everybody else lays down on the bed, and Nick says, you guys go to sleep. There's just a little bit too much strangeness going on. I'm going to stay up and kind of keep vigilance. And so, Nick, he's laying there, and they have a closet with a light on, and then that's enough illumination to kind of see around the room. And so Nick, he's laying there, and he's just sort of waiting for maybe something to happen, or hopefully dawn to come and everybody can get up and be done with this. And then the closet light that he has turned on just suddenly turns off. And so Nick, he gets up and he slowly goes over to the bathroom and he turns that light on, and he kind of checks around because now he's getting creeped out. And then he goes and he sits back down. And then as he's sitting in bed, kind of waiting, there's a knock at the door between the two suites. Now remember, the door to get into that suite is locked and barred. It's not possible for somebody to be in there. But he just heard a knock coming from the door that conjoins these two rooms. It should not be possible. And Nick spends a second thinking, maybe it's from another room or another door. And then the knock comes again louder, and it is very clearly this door. It's right next to them. It could be nowhere else. And so Nick, he thinks, should I go over there? But he's like, I can't stay here. I'm too unsettled to just stay here. So he jumps up, and he runs over, he unlocks the door and runs in. And again, empty. There's nothing here. But now Nick, he's got goosebumps on his arms. Like something is going on. Both of his kids are freaking out. The light turned off. He's hearing this knocking. He just feels like something is actually going on here. And so, he closes the door again, he locks it again, he goes, he sits back down, and now he's trying to relax and just wait for the light to come so they can get out of here and put this whole experience behind them. And then, as he's laying there, suddenly Amanda shoots up from her bed, and she's sweating, and she's screaming, and she's like, oh my God, and Nick is like, what? What's wrong? And Amanda, she suddenly gets her bearings and realizes where she's at, she calms down, she says, oh my goodness, Nick, she's like, I was just having a nightmare that I was stuck in that other room, the conjoined room. She's like, I was in the kids' side of the suite, and I was trying to get over here, and the door was locked, and I couldn't get over here, and that entity, that all-white, scary entity, was in there with me, and it was coming at me, and I was trying to get out, and I couldn't get out. And that's when I woke up. And she's like, and I was screaming, and I didn't know where I was, and she's like, man, something is going on. Something's wrong here. We got to get out of here. And Nick's like, yeah, I know. He didn't want to tell her too much, but he's like, I also agree. He said, what we should do is when we wake up in the morning, let's question our son, hear what he had to see now that, once he's actually awake and not in the middle of being woken up by some scary entity, and then we're going to pack up and go. And so they go, and, Amanda falls back asleep. Nick, he waits throughout the rest of the night, and then the sun does finally come up. They wake the kids up. They're like, all right, we're going to pack, but first, explain what you saw. And they're talking to their son, and he says he was on the lower bunk, and he basically saw what sounds like the same thing, this tall, paper white entity. He said it was more like grayish white, and it approached him, and it had these like glowing eyes. He said it almost looked like their cat. When you catch a cat in the dark and your light reflects off their eyes, that's what he said its eyes looked like. And he said as it was walking around their room, it was speaking in a language he did not understand. He said he was whispering, he couldn't really hear it, but anything he did catch sounded totally foreign to his ears. And so he said at some point the thing approached his bed and it had this long shadow, which is why he called it the shadow creature. And that was it. His son couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up, ran around this thing, and then left. And so he must have ran into their room, laid down, and then at that point, that's when their daughter must have been awake and was crouched in her bed and saw this thing coming around, and then it turned and went out. And so they're piecing this together. Both their kids swear they saw the same thing, even though they did not hear each other's story. And then Nick heard the knocking, and his wife had the nightmare, and the light turning off, and just all of this is madness to Nick. He's like, this is the weirdest thing ever. So let's get out of here, and let's go over and pack everything, and let's just leave. We're going to leave the vacation early. We can't stay here another night. And so they go into this adjoining room, and Nick goes first, and he makes sure everything is clear, and then they all come in, and they start to pack everything. And as they're packing everything, the smell of incense is very, very powerful in this room. Like, it permeates everything. Really, really thick, almost chokingly so. And so very quickly, the family, they all pack everything up, and that's it. They all head out, and they go back home. And so Nick, right away, he gets online, and he's posting, and he's like, we went and did this. I don't even believe in anything supernatural, but I need to know, what was this thing? And now the entire internet community that's talking about this, they just don't know. People have posited aliens or creatures, ghosts, demonic activity. Nobody knows. All anybody can say for sure is that Nick and Amanda took their kids to the Great Wolf Lodge, and there was an evil entity waiting for them in their room. And so that's going to do it for today's story. If you found yourself enjoying this or any of the stories on my channel, first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and I do these longer videos Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then I also throw out shorts throughout the week. Second, of course, like I mentioned, they're all true first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you're anybody you know has a story and you think it would fit really well on my channel, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on any of my social media, and we'll find a time to collect your story and potentially one day feature it here on The Orator. And so until next time, where you may pull up your chair and settle in, the fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.